I think I was noodling around this topic a little bit with Nick Wright, but it's a big topic. And I think I also took a glancing blow at it when I wrote about Dan Le Batard. I wonder if some of these people who have platforms in sports media who've been overtly not just anti-Trump, which I think that makes a lot of sense. He's the president. He's a very controversial guy, to say the least, but also critical of. Well, I don't know. He did win the popular vote. Maybe he's just popular. This is the mainstream. How do you even go down the list of old Trump's 8-year presidential career thus far? But I wonder if there's going to be a tonal shift at all, and just this admission of, look, we're operating in the sports space. Most of our fans and listeners vote for this guy or support him. I know that might be shocking to some people to hear that. But if you just look at the numbers, if you realize that, the heavy male skew in sports fandom and look at who votes for Donald Trump, that's the deal. And I know there's this perhaps a moral purity urge to go, I don't care. I don't care if most of my fans are into this guy. I still think this. And people will express that view, and that's a view in sports media. But I do wonder if there's this shift that nobody admits to, and this acknowledgement and realization that, no, this isn't just MAGA cultists. This isn't just a little fringe that we can all get together and stigmatize and regard as taboo. This is actually the majority of sports fans. And perhaps we need to reach some sort of accommodation and tonal change considering the new world we're in. Do you see any evidence of that, Ryan, or is it just going to be like it was?
ESPN was totally different this time around than the last two election cycles. And that's not only what was on their airwaves, but the way that the people conducted themselves on social media. And so there were two people that wrote about this that I want to give a shout out to. John Oran at Puck kind of got the ball rolling. And he wrote a thing in his newsletter that Greeny set the tone, where he goes, I know elections weighing on a lot of people's minds, but if you're here on ESPN, you're here because you don't want to be thinking about this right now. And so we're going to talk about sports and be an escape. And I think that's what a majority of ESPN viewers, by the way, whether they vote Democrat or Republican, have wanted from the network for the last decade. And that was an on-air acknowledgement of it. And so that's something that Jimmy Pitaro and Burke Magnus have tried to be very cognizant of. And there's a part of Oren's thing that I disagreed with, and Bobby Burak wrote about it at Outkick. Bobby also reported that ESPN formally contacted their talents and was basically, I don't know the exact wording, but the equivalent of it was about shut the fuck up about the election. And, but Oran said ESPN is not woke. He did a podcast with Ben Strauss where they talked about FS1 actually being more woke than ESPN. Yeah. I don't know if I'd go that far, because it hasn't been that long since, Caitlin Clark was coming on the scene as a rookie, and everybody at ESPN who was talking about her was saying she's not going to be that good. They're not bullying her. Why are we even talking about her? This is a mid-off. And then she just surpassed anybody's wildest expectations, and the early discourse has been a little bit memory hold. So I'd like to see another kind of controversial topic along those lines, where I don't think that ESPN skews in the proverbial woke direction before I'm willing to just, call this over. Yeah. But they did. Nobody, it wasn't even that they didn't talk about the election on the airwaves. I didn't see any of their people who have been zealous about politics in the past even tweeting about it on social media. And, if you just remember the way, Trump makes everybody so emotional. And I'm not going to say that that's unjustified. People can feel however they want about anything. I don't care. But I just noticed that there were no overwrought tweets from ESPN talents about this country
Yeah.
is over.
Yeah.
And so I don't know whether, like, I assume that whatever message was delivered from ESPN brass to them was just heard loud and clear, or if there's an understanding like, hey, maybe we'd rather if we had the MSNBC audience, but we have an audience of sports fans that, as you said, skews Trump supporting, and we got to serve that audience sports talk and just keep out of this other lane.
Yeah, there's a little detente. This idea that this is a space where we're going to talk about the thing you want and not alienate you because we think it's so important to lecture you, which clearly doesn't seem to be working. It just doesn't seem to be working. Maybe if it was working, one could make an argument for continuing to do it. I thought the Ben Strauss, my namesake, the argument that FS1 is more woke than ESPN was interesting. A little Nixon goes to China. I didn't ask Nick about that. There's only so much you can talk about, but I don't know. It seems like that's drafting off just the choices made by individuals. When we say this is more than that, we're talking about a few individuals and strong personalities. And Nick is just taking off like a rocket ship over there, and he's team blue.
I mean, it'd be like him and Joy Taylor, but that's about it. Like the rest, Colin is a tough guy to nail down politically. Emmanuel Acho actually is like a tough guy to nail down politically. That's part of like why he's like so exciting, is because you don't know what his take on any given issue is going to be. And James Jones or Chase Daniel, like nobody knows what they think about the election, or at least I don't. And I feel like I'm one of the most engaged sports media viewers there is. And so if I don't know, I feel like almost nobody does. But that's what's known as a humble brag.
I don't know. That's something you want to brag about, but we appreciate it as listeners. Continue.
So, I mean, I guess that just boils down to Nick Wright, who was, signed a new deal with Fox for substantial amount of money. And is being billed, in at least in that story that broke the news, but front office, is the future face of FS1. He's not shy about how he feels politically, just as he wasn't shy about saying, I consider myself very liberal on your podcast. And so from that sense, I guess you could say that, because if he's the future face of the network and he's made this political stance clear. But I'll go back to that Caitlin Clark early rookie and WNBA discourse, and I don't think you're going to see anything like that, like volume of takes that all skew in one direction on FS1 like you saw on ESPN at that time. And I guess, Stephen A. pushed back, and at times Wilbon pushed back, and Shannon Sharp pushed back. But the people who were allowed to have the final word were very strongly rowing in one direction that I think got later discredited.
I would agree with that. And I thought that Fox generally had more reasonable takes on that. But I also think, and this is my personal opinion, that the Fox Sports product just tends to be better. And so it's downstream of that. It just tends to be a better product. It tends to be more anchored in the sports reality versus drafting off social media opinion. And so that, I think, is a continuance of the pattern that I've seen. I just prefer the FS1 product. I don't reject everything out of ESPN, but it feels a little synthetic. It feels a little contrived to me. I think the Ben Strauss argument also almost reflects a progressive worldview where it's, if you're not with us, you're against us, where it's, well, Stephen A. is friends with Sean Hannity. And it's just, well, I don't have much of an indication that Stephen A. Smith is a conservative based on his commentary. He's just somebody who believes that he can still be friends with somebody like Sean Hannity.